Whoa! Sorry, my headset fell off. Okay, so before we start actually graphing, we do need to come up with how are we going to find what our center is and what our radius is, because that's going to be the key to being able to graph these circles. So up above here, just a reminder, this is our standard form of a circle. You have x minus h squared plus y minus k squared equals r squared. You want to remember that h and k is your center point. Okay, so h and k is your center point, and r is your radius. So the first thing I want you guys to do is pause the video real quick, and based on what you see up here, tell me what you think the center and the radius is. So for our center, I got two answers, I bet. I got negative 13 and 5, or, and that's probably the most common right there, negative 13, 5, or I got 13, negative 5. Okay? Pause the video again and see if you can figure out which one it is actually supposed to be. Okay, so what I want to point out to you guys is I want to point out that we have an x minus h. And notice that that h that I put there is in red. Okay? The minus sign does not have anything to do with the h. X minus h. So 13 is actually the x coordinate. So 13 and negative 5 is our center. Pause it again and see if you can figure out why that is a negative 5. Okay? So, explanation for why that's a negative 5. Again, this is a y minus k, right? Which means that this part in parentheses here, its standard form is a y minus. So if that's a y minus, how did they end up with a positive 5 there? Well, that's because our k value was a negative 5. This is really a y minus minus 5. Okay, what do those two negatives do? Well, those two negatives go together to make a plus sign, which is how we end up with our y plus 5. Okay, so the center for this circle, the center for this circle is 13, negative 5. Okay, so you guys can go through and rewrite this every time to remind you of how you know that it's 13, negative 5. Okay, or you can remember that when you guys are doing the standard form of a circle, you're always going to flip the sign. So when I move from equation to center, I flip the sign. And later, when we go over the graph side of it, when you move from center to the equation, you flip the sign. Okay? So it's always a sign flip back and forth between equation to graph, graph to equation. Okay? So our center for this is going to be a 13, negative 5. The next question is our radius. Pause the video and see if you can tell me what the radius is. Okay, couple things that I got for the radius. The answers that I'm guessing, I got 25 for my radius, and I got 5 for my radius. Okay, pause it again, see if you guys can confirm which one you think it actually is. Is it 25 or is it R? I'm sorry, is it 25 or is it 5? Okay. And then the thing I want to point out to you guys for your radius is that what this side equals r squared. So for this side, if I want to figure out what my radius is, it's not r squared. Our radius is just r. So in order to find your radius, you've got to take a square root of that side of the equal sign. So 25 is not our radius, but the square root of 25 is our radius, and we know the square root of 25 is 5. So if I'm rewriting this in a standard form, it wouldn't be 25, it would be 5 squared on that side. That 5 is my radius. Okay, so the center of this circle is at 13, negative 5, and the radius of this circle is 5. Okay, so let's go through, let's practice some of these graphing. Okay, starting out with, I've got 9 equals x plus 1 squared plus y minus 3 squared. Okay, the first thing that I want us to do is I want to know what is the center of this circle. Okay, what's the center of this circle? Well, you should not be saying 1, negative 3, because remember we have to flip the signs on our points. So negative 1, 3 is going to be the center of our circle. And when I go to graph this circle, the first thing that I need to do is I need to graph the center. So at negative 1, 3, I'm going to put a point. The next thing that I need to determine is my radius. Common mistake for the radius is people are going to say that the radius of this circle is 9. The radius of this circle is not 9. Remember, to find your radius, you've got to take the square root. What's the square root of 9? 3. So my radius is 3. Okay? Now, I've identified all the parts of the circle that I need to graph this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to plot my center. And after you plot your center, you need to plot 4 additional points. Okay? I'm going to plot a point to the right of my center. How far does it need to go? 3. So I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, and put a point 3 away from my center. I'm going to put a point 3 down from my center, a point 3 to the left from my center, and a point 3 up from my center. Once I get all 3 of those points down, I'm ready to draw my circle. So I'm going to take my time, try to make this the best circle that I possibly can. Guys, I'm not going to lie, that was pretty freaking impressive. That was freehand. I'm going to brag about that a little bit. That was pretty good. Okay? After you guys draw your circle, the only other thing that I want you guys to do is I want you to draw a line from the center to the edge of your circle. Now, if it's from the center to your edge, that would be the radius, right? So all I want you guys to label on your circle, draw your center, put your 4 points, draw it as best you can, and then I want you guys to label that radius. This radius is a 3. Okay? That'll be really important because sometimes your radius isn't always an even number. Sometimes your radius might be a square root of some number. Okay? But we do want to label our radius when we graph our circle. Okay, so there's an example of that. Let's go to the next slide then. The rest of these, we just got 4 examples on how we're graphing these. Okay? Next one I've got x squared plus y squared equals 9. X squared plus y squared equals 9. Okay, this one has a trick to it. Remember, your standard form is x minus h squared plus y minus k squared. Okay? I think most of you guys hopefully look at this and you're like, oh yeah, square root to find my radius. The radius of this thing is 3. Hopefully you guys can recognize that because square root of 9 is 3. Okay? But what is our center? What is our center for this circle? I've got x squared plus y squared. That looks different. What's our center? What is the h and k value in that? A lot of people are going to tell me that the h and k value is 1. And I will tell you guys the h and k value is not 1. If the h and k value was 1, when I plug that in, that would be x minus 1 squared plus y minus 1 squared. Can I take x minus 1 to get just an x? No, I can't take x minus 1 to just get an x because they're not like terms. So the center of the circle is not 1, 1. So the question becomes, what number can I subtract by that's not going to change the value? What number can I plug in there and take x minus that number so that it won't change it and it'll still be a value of x? Well, the answer to that would be 0. What's x minus 0? Well, it's just x. Y minus 0. Well, that's just y. Okay? So if you ever see just an x squared, the x coordinate is 0. If you ever see just a y squared, the y coordinate is 0. And this is y right here. That's why those y coordinates are 0. So the center of this circle is at 0, 0. It's at the very center of the graph. Okay? Once you plot that, we've got to use our radius that we found to find our other 4 points. So I can go up 3, to the right 3, down 3, to the left 3. And I'm going to do my best to draw a circle. A little shaky on the one side. Okay? Label it with a radius of 3. Okay? This one over here on the right, This one should be easier to find your center. Pause it, find your center real quick. Okay, remember when we do our center, we're switching signs. So this should be 2, -2. My x switch the sign as a +2. My y switch the sign as a -2. Okay, so at 2, -2, that's my center. My radius on this one. A lot of people are going to want to say the radius is 2, but remember the radius is not 2, it is the square root of that number. So it's the square root of 2. What is the square root of 2? I don't know. If you plug it in your calculator, square root of 2 is going to say it's about 1.4. So when I do this radius, I can't mark it exactly that, but I can do an approximation. 1.4, that's about 1/2. So I'm going to put 1.5 away, 1.5 away, 1.5 away, 1.5 away. And this right here, guys, is a perfect example as to why we label our radius. Because that distance is an approximation. So I need to label it. And when I label it, that makes it exact. So that's a square root of 2 now. Okay? All right. One more slide for our practices. Okay? I want you guys to pause the video here. Try to graph both of these on your own. Pause the video. Try to graph both these on your own. Okay, hopefully you guys have graphed both of these on your own. We talked about this when your x squared and a y squared is just those. X squared by itself, that's a 0. Y squared by itself, that's a 0. So our center for this one is at 0, 0. The radius of this one is the square root of 36, so our radius is 6. Up 6, right 6, down 6, left 6 is a big circle. I think the big circles are the ones that are harder to draw. Okay, and I've got to label my radius. That is a radius of 6. Okay, again, hopefully you've paused this, tried this on your own. We've got our center would be at 5, 3. We change the sign. -5 becomes a positive sign. 5, -3 becomes a positive 3. So to the right 5 and up 3. Okay, and then our radius for this, remember we're taking the square root of 4 to find our radius. Our radius would be 2, right 2, down 2, left 2, up 2. And I'm just drawing my circle. Small circles, much easier to draw. Label that radius with 2. Okay, so that is graphing our circles. Okay, last video is going to be taking a graph of it and then coming up with the equation.